So, I don't speak German, but I'm going to pretend to speak German. And it's all right to laugh at my German, okay? I'm so nervous. We've got to do this. It is genuinely, it's fine to laugh, okay? Vielen Dank für die Einladung. Vielen Dank für Ihr Kommen. Okay? Does this make sense? Wenn Sie mich fragen, was die Essence meiner Bücher ist, ich glaube, dass das Leben schön, überraschend und kompliziert ist. Does this make sense? Meine Bücher sind meine Dankesbriefe. Yes. Ich möchte sagen, danke für die Kompliziertheit und die Schönheit des Lebens. Ach so. Danke Deutschland. Danke Deutschland für eure erstaunlichen Geschichten, für die Gebrüder Grimm, für meinen Held Eric Kästner, für Michael Ende, Cornelia Funke, Sarah Nora. Aber vor allem danke dafür, dass die anderen Länder Europas uns gezeigt haben, wie man Flüchtlinge willkommen heißt. Mein Heimatland war voller Angst, bis wir die Flüchtlinge am Bahnhof sahen und sie begrüßt haben, ihr habt uns... Ihr habt uns den Weg gezeigt. Danke. Thank you so much. Very good. Can we have a round of applause for good English? So that's enough speeches. I'm going to tell you a story because I love stories. I wrote a book a long time ago called Millions. And Millions is about two little boys who find a bag full of money. And this is actually a very, very old story. Millions was made into a film by a guy called Danny Boyle. And he had already made a film about three friends who find a bag full of money and they decide to keep it secret. But they fall out with each other and they kill each other. And before that, there was a famous film called A Simple Plan, and that's about two friends who find a bag of money and they try to keep it secret, but they fall out with each other and then they kill each other. And one of the greatest films and one of the greatest books of all time is a book called The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. And that's about three old men who find a gold mine and they try to keep it secret, but they fall out with each other, and guess what happens? Okay. And going way back in time, there's a story by a man called Geoffrey Chaucer who wrote a big book called The Canterbury Tales. Who knows about the Canterbury Tales? This is an amazing school. What school is this? You should get a round of applause for literary knowledge. And my favourite story in the Canterbury Tales is called The Pardoner's Tale. You already know it. Oh my God. And when I first heard this story, I was your age, but I didn't know it was by Geoffrey Chaucer. I read it in a comic. But I'm going to tell you the story. The story happens in Italy, in a beautiful town on top of a hill, with walls all around it, and there are olive groves, and it's beautiful. It's peaceful. It's probably the best place in the world to live. And there are 4 young men in this town, and they are the coolest young men in town. They spend all their day playing dice and singing and talking to women and fencing and fighting. And they are the happiest people in the happiest town in the whole world. But this story happens at the time of the Black Death. Does anyone know what the Black Death is? Go and tell me what the Black Death is. The plague. A round of applause for medical knowledge. Okay, so there's a terrible plague. Thousands of people in Europe die. And one of the 4 young men dies. And the other 3 young men are very sad. How are they going to get over their loss? How are they going to make themselves happy again? If it was you, you might say, I'm going to tell a story. If it was you, you might say, oh, we'll always remember him, or we'll be nice to his mother, or you might say, we'll put flowers on his grave, or you might say, I'm going to study and learn to be a doctor and cure people of this plague. But these were young men in the 14th century, and they didn't think like that. They thought, there is one thing that will make us happy, and that thing that will cheer us up and make us happy again is revenge. Our friend has died. We will make ourselves happy by going out and killing someone else. But who could they kill? Who can you kill in revenge for the plague? Could they kill the doctor who should have saved their friend? Could they kill the mayor who let the plague into the town? Could they kill the merchants? No. They're more ambitious than that. They've got one idea about who to kill. Who are they going to kill? They want to kill death! We're going to find death and we're going to kill death. We'll go and find death and we'll kill him. Is this a good idea? Is this story going to have a happy ending? Okay. Spoiler alert! Okay, so we're going to kill death. So the 4 friends go out and they have some drinks. 3. Thank you. Another round of applause. Thank you very much. The 3 friends. They go out and they have some drinks, and they get their swords, and they get their clubs, and they rampage around the town looking for death. Do they find death? No, they don't find death. They go all over the town, but they don't find death. But at the very edge of the town, at the gate, sitting by the gate, they find a little old man. And they think to themselves, this man is old. So obviously, he's gonna die soon. All we have to do is sit here and wait for death to come and get him. And then we will jump out and we will kill death. And in the meantime, we could have a few more drinks. So they sit with their bottles of wine, getting drunker and drunker, watching the old man. And the old man sees them and says, what are you doing? And they say, well, no offense, but you're really old, so you're going to die soon, right? But you're not going to die, because when death comes to get you, we are going to kill death. Prost. You're a lucky old man. Thank you, says the little old man. But in fact, you don't have to wait, because death is coming to get me this afternoon. And I happen to know that death is in the field having a nap. So the 3 friends say, thank you, little old man. And they run into the field. And it is Italy, and it's lunchtime, and the sun is shining. And in there, just lying there in the field, in the shade of the olive trees, doing nothing at all in the hot afternoon, is a great big pile of gold coins. Huge pile of gold. And the moment they see the gold, they forget about death, they forget about revenge, they forget about their friend, they forget about the plague. They just have one thought in their heads, and that thought is, we are rich. And the first man says, this is the greatest day of our lives. we can marry who we want, we can travel where we never have to work. We should celebrate. I'll go and buy some more wine. And the second man says, you would do that? You would trust us to split the money? You would not to run away while your back is turned, not to steal all the money, not to give you less? That is so beautiful. I love you. You're my best friend. Give me a hug. And the second man says, don't worry, I'll just go and buy a bottle of wine. So off he goes. And all the time the man is walking away, the first man is going, I love you, you're my best friend. I want to hug you, I love you, I love you. You're an idiot. Idiot. As if we're going to split the money 3 ways. There's 2 of us, there's 1 of him. When he comes back, we'll kill him. And we'll split the money between us. And then instead of being rich, we'll be very rich. And man number 2 is walking away going, bye, I'll buy a bottle of wine, don't worry, I'll be back, bye, 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 I love you too, I love you too, you pair of idiots. As if I'm going to split the money 3 ways. I'm going to kill these other 2, and then I'll have all the money to myself, and then instead of being very rich, I will be super rich. So he goes to the off-license and he buys a bottle of wine, but he doesn't buy a nice bottle, he buys a bottle with a screw-top lid. And then he goes to the chemist, to the apothecary, and he buys a bottle of poison. He takes the lid off the bottle of wine, and he pours in the poison, and he puts the lid back on the bottle of wine, and he goes back to his friends and says, I'm back! And they kill him. Cut his throat. And they drop him in the ditch. And they celebrate by... So they all die. So they did find death. Right? So, or maybe death found them. So that is an old story. That's at least 600 years old. That's the end of the story, by the way. I love that story, and I've loved that story all my life. So, and it was already a very old story when Chaucer wrote it down 700 years ago. So the first thing I want to say to you is this. People always ask writers where they get their ideas from. And the best place to get ideas is to steal other people's ideas. Because the minute you steal it, you change it. Because you put some of you in the story. So when I tried to write that story with Millions, my idea, because people have told that story with drug dealers, with princes, with gold miners, with people in the Middle Ages, but no one had ever done it with children. And I thought, if I change that story and I tell that story with children, will it be different? So you change one thing and everything becomes different. Why? Because telling a story is like alchemy, and every single one of you is like the philosopher's stone. You are the magic ingredient that turns every other story into gold. You bring them to life. You make the dead thing live. But there's something else I wanted to tell you about this story. When Geoffrey Chaucer wrote it down, it was already very old. He heard that story from France, but the French heard it from the Germans heard it from the Hungarians, there's versions in Greece, there's a version in Tibet, and there's a version in India. And I recently heard a version in Africa. And in that version, 3 men ask their chief where he thinks death comes from. Now they've all got different ideas. One of them says, death is a punishment from God. Another one says, death is caused by germs. And the third one says, death is caused by bad spirits. And the chief, because by asking him the question, they're challenging the chief. They're saying, can you really answer this question? Are we cleverer than you? Maybe we should be the chief. But the chief says, go hunting in the woods, and you will find out what causes death. And he hides a big box of money in the woods. So when they're out hunting, one of the men finds the box of money, and, well, you know what happens. They all kill each other. They find death, and the chief just carries on being the chief. So that story has travelled all around the world. and it's travelled through time for at least 700 years. And this is true about every great story. Every romantic comedy film that you've ever seen is really a remake of Cinderella, or Cendrillon, or Aschenputtel, a story which has also been all around the world. The oldest version of that story comes from China, and it's one of the oldest things. It's one of the oldest things that men have ever made, is the story of Cinderella. How do stories do this? How do stories get from place to place? How do they stay alive for hundreds of years? How do they keep making themselves look new? It happens because no matter what language we speak, because I speak German, as you know, no matter how rich or poor we are, or whether we were born 1,000 years ago, or whether you were born this morning, whatever race or religion you are us. We are us. And we have, next to all our hearts, the very same hopes and fears. And our hopes and fears are in our stories. And our strengths and our weaknesses are in our stories. Think about the hopes and fears in The Pardoner's Tale. Those men are scared to die. They want money. They want power. They worry that their friends are not really their friends, that money is more important than friendship. It's not a very pretty picture, but it is a true picture. The truth about ourselves is sometimes not very pretty. Like the fear in that story. This summer, for my summer holidays, I went with my son and we walked along Hadrian's Wall. Does anyone know what Hadrian's Wall is? Who can tell me what Hadrian's Wall is? It's a Roman wall. Can you shout that really loud? Okay, did anyone hear? Okay. When the Romans came to Britain in about the year 70, they built a wall. They built a wall in the year 122. They built a wall, a huge, huge wall from one side of the country to the other. I walked the wall this summer. It took me 5 days to walk across it. It's so long, it's 80 miles long, and they built this wall across the end of England to keep the Scottish people out. Because they liked the English, but the Scottish were just crazy savages. And the wall was the northernmost limit of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was a very international thing. The emperor who built the wall was called Hadrian, but he wasn't Roman, he was from Spain. And the troops who he sent to man the wall, they came from all over the empire. Some of them came from Spain, some of them came from the Balkans, some of them came from Italy, some were from Turkey. And their job was to keep the barbarian Scots out of the empire. On one side of the wall, there were all these wonderful things that the Romans had. There were bathhouses and villas, and you could write letters, and you could get olive oil and figs and oysters. All the way up on this cold northern border, you could get all the wonderful things from Italy. But on the other side were just Scottish savages who had no clothes and painted themselves blue and just went all day long. And I think they used to kind of go and look at the wall, and they probably wanted some of the olive oil and some of the oysters, because even now in Scotland you can't get those things. All the way through history, people have built walls, like the Emperor Hadrian. All the time I was growing up, when I was your age, there was a wall through the middle of this city, a wall that divided the world in two. People are building a wall in Palestine now, and some people are trying to build a wall in Europe. And the one thing we know about walls is that in the end they fall down. People move around like stories move around, and in some periods they move around more than others. You are living in one of the great eras of human movement. There are lots of causes, some of them are good, some of them are terrible, but it is a fact. And history will judge us by how we deal with the challenges and joys of living in this moment. Every period in history has its story. In the 14th century, the story was the plague. In the Roman Empire, the story was the Roman Empire and the war. This is your story, and you have to decide whether you're going to be a hero or a bad guy or a bystander. What part in the story are you going to play? Were you afraid? Did you try to close the castle door? or did you open the castle door? Some people in our world try to define themselves not by their humanity, not by their hopes and fears, but by their address, by the place they were born. In the last century, nearly all the countries in Europe had governments that thought like that. Here in Germany, you had a government that thought like that. And they tried to get rid of all the foreign stories from the schools and from the libraries. The Arabian Nights and Alice in Wonderland and Winnie the Pooh and Huckleberry Finn, they all went. When people try to get rid of those books, they're trying to burn the infrastructure of imagination. They're trying to destroy the roads that join our hearts and minds together. But after the war, a woman who had left Germany and lived in London went back to Germany to help put those books back. Her name was Jella Lettman, and she loved children's books. And she wanted to rebuild those roads that join us all together. She had no budget, she begged books from foreign publishers, and she laid down the foundations of a thing called the International Children's Library in Munich, which is my favourite library in the whole world. Jella Lettman made cheap editions of the books that had been banned. She had a version of Emil and the Detectives that was printed on newspaper. There are still copies, you can still see them, they're so frail. And you can almost feel how hungry people were for stories. Her original collection of books is now in this beautiful castle in Munich called the Schloss Blutenberg, and that is now the International Children's Library. If you go there, you'll see it's the most beautiful library in the world. It's got pointy towers and windy corridors and a river, and she got lots of great writers to help her, like Eric Kastner, Astrid Lundgren, P.L. Travers, who wrote Mary Poppins. The Schloss Blutenberg has only got one entrance. It was designed as a castle. It was designed to keep people out. But she opened the door and she let everybody back in. And she is one of my heroes. So I'd like to take a moment now and thank all the translators in the world who made us able to hear each other's stories. When I was growing up, I absolutely loved the story of Emil and the Detectives, which is set here in Berlin. But the city in the book was so like my city, with kids roaming around the streets and electric trains and policemen, that I didn't even know it was set in a faraway country. I used to love the Moomin books by Tove Jansson. They were set in a country where it was always snowing and the sea froze. It was called Finland. I didn't realise that Finland was a real country till I was quite grown up. I thought she had made it up like Narnia. But the Moomins, this big family where their mother always knew what to do, they seem more real to me than the people who live next door. So thank you, translators. You are the muscle that powers the hearts of our imagination. Another country I heard about when I was growing up, but thought was too magical to be real, was called Mongolia. That's a desert where people go hunting with eagles. They hunt wolves with eagles. Imagine that. A country that was founded by Genghis Khan. I definitely thought he wasn't real. And one of its cities is called Xanadu, which comes straight out of a fairy tale. Then one day I was visiting a school in Liverpool, and there was a refugee family from Mongolia. They were amazing. They were very popular, especially the girl who was called Michiel. And everybody loved them. Then one day the government deported the family in the middle of the night. And the children at the school were very, very sad, especially when they saw that she had left her coat behind. They remembered her telling them that even in the desert it gets cold at night. And that's why I wrote this book, The Unforgotten Coat, which is about Michiel's coat. So I'm going to end by reading you a little bit from the book. And in the book, I changed Michiel, who was a girl, into two boys called Chingiz and Nergui. And in the bit I'm going to read you, they've just turned up in school, out of the blue. They've just turned up in school, they're sitting in class, and the younger one, Nergui, is wearing his hat. And the teacher says he mustn't wear his hat in school. You mustn't wear your hat in school, you must take your hat off. And Chingiz, his big brother, tries to defend him and wants him to wear his hat. So this is Chingiz, Nergui, and the teacher who's called Mrs. Spendlove. She says, I'm afraid you have to take your hat off in class, Nergui. No, said Chingiz. Everyone looked at Mrs. Spendlove. We can't have people wearing hats in class, Chinggis. Everyone looked at Chinggis. This was like watching high-tension tennis. It will be dangerous to take off my brother's hat. How can it be dangerous to take off his hat? Is his head not fastened to his neck properly? Everybody laughed, and the laugh gave her a little bit of edge. It's not dangerous for him. It might be dangerous for you, said Chinggis. Mrs. Spendler frowned. Was Chinggis threatening her? If I take off his hat, maybe he will go crazy and kill everybody. He was definitely threatening her. He was threatening all of us. He was threatening us with his little brother. Chinggis, when you need your eagle to be calm, what do you do? I don't know. She looked around the class. Did anybody know? Why would anybody know? Of course, when you want your eagle to be calm, you cover his eyes with a hood. When you want your eagle to kill, you take off the hood. My brother is my eagle. With his hat on, he is calm. If I take his hat off, I don't know what he's going to do. This was year 6. We had been at school for 6 years. Until that moment, I thought I had learned everything I would ever need to learn. I knew how to work out the volume of a cube. I knew who had painted the sunflowers. I knew the history of St. Lucia. I knew about the Tudors and lines of symmetry and the importance of eating 5 portions of fruit and vegetable a day. In all that time, no one had ever given me a single lesson in eagle calming. I had never even heard the subject of eagle calming mentioned. I had no idea that a person might need eagle calming skills. And in that moment, I felt my own ignorance spread out behind me like a pair of wings. And every single thing that I didn't know was a feather on those wings. And I could feel them tugging at the air, restless to fly. Okay, so I wish you flight. Listen to each other and learn to fly. Thank you.